I'm delighted to announce that Actualol has 100,000 subscribers. After 8.5 years on YouTube, I finally got the same amount of subscribers as a teenager who makes videos about Minecraft can get in 6 months. I was waiting to make this video to show off my silver plaque, but that hasn't arrived yet. YouTube decided I've already waited 102 months, what's another one? Okay, so it arrived just as I was about to post the video. Thank you, YouTube, and thank you everyone that has subscribed over the years. To celebrate reaching this milestone, I've got a very different video for you than usual. I'm going to tell you about my life, share some stories. So if you've ever wondered who this guy is that makes board game videos, where I'm from, what I did before YouTube, this is the video for you. And to keep it on topic, I've thrown in some board game related stories as well. But before we start, I'd really like to thank all of my patrons over the years who have kept Actualol alive. There's no question that without your support, I would have stopped making videos a long time ago. Without knowing, you have kept me going through personal struggles more than once. I'd like to personally shout out some of the longest giving, most generous patrons. CD Doyle, James McMillan, Ricky Rodriguez, Melissa Pananon, Derek Foote, Francesca Slade, Chris Dolsky, and Derek Griffey. Thank you. I'd also like to thank my friends who have gamed with me over the last 8 years, including 4 Toms, 3 Bens, 2 Andys, Pankaj Neil, Eister Anna, Archie Zijan, Paul, Anthony, Becky, Vic, Michele, and my wife Serena. You can't review board games without people to play them with, and I really appreciate all the time you've given up to playing new and often painfully mediocre games when you could have been rock climbing instead. Right, time to get personal. I grew up in a small city called Salisbury. If people haven't heard of it, I always used to tell them that it's near Stonehenge, because it is. But now everyone knows it as the place where the Russian poisonings took place, and those innocent guys who came to see the famous cathedral and its 123-meter spire. Which I know everyone thinks is a ridiculous thing to say, but if you grow up there, it's all they go on about. It's the tallest church spire in the UK, and there's a copy of the Magna Carta, and the oldest working clock in the world, apparently. And because of that, there are tourists everywhere. And because it's a small place, you really notice hordes of French school kids with their matching purple rucksacks. To give you an idea of the size, we had a McDonald's and a Burger King, but no KFC. I remember my brother would go to Southampton to play Warhammer. Oh yeah, my brother played Warhammer and I didn't. And he would come back with stories of family feasts and bargain buckets, which sounded incredible to me. The Warhammer not so much. For high school, I went to a boys-only grammar school called Bishop Wordsworth's. A grammar school is one you have to pass an exam to get into at 11 years old, which was the pinnacle of my academic achievements. It was the same school that the actors Rafe and Joseph Fiennes went to, which has obviously been a great source of inspiration to me, because just like them, I haven't won any Oscars. I hated the school. It was so strict and old-fashioned. I was always getting put in detention for talking too much or talking back. In the summer, we would roast alive because they wouldn't let us take off our ties and woolen blazers. I remember being in music class, listening to another dull piece of classical music, and the kid next to me told me that his cousins, who go to school in London, got to study pop music in their music classes. I was so envious. It sounded like a wonderland. I left that school as soon as I could, and I went to college in the New Forest, a place called Brockenhurst, where you could wear normal clothes, study pop music, and talk to girls. It felt like going from black and white to colour for the first time. Not that any girls wanted to talk to me, because this is what I looked like when I started college. I was supposed to be 16 years old. The holder of this card is under 18. Yeah, you don't say. The first modern board game I ever played was The Settlers of Catan, and I was lucky enough to play it not long after it came out because my friend Will was introduced to it by a German family on holiday, and they wrote out the rules for him in English, so he had a copy long before it was available in the UK. Now, I didn't know what any of the words meant, so I called the settlements houses and the cities cathedrals. Living in Salisbury really gets in your head. And thanks to the German reference card, I still call the development cards Entwicklungs. But Catan didn't begin my love affair with board games. I liked it for a bit, but I would get really frustrated with not getting the rolls I needed. And my friend Will would always win, so much so that the rest of us thought he was cheating. And part of me wants to ask him now if he used to cheat back then, but I sort of don't want to know the answer. It's like asking your parents if they voted for Brexit. A few years later, we got really into the game Perudo, which you might know as Liar's Dice, which isn't a modern game, but is a good one. And for our 18th birthday, me, Will, and Tom went to the Lake District for a week to stay in a cabin in the woods where we played loads of Perudo. The place we were staying was very rustic. It didn't have any toilets, just a bucket. And at the end of the stay, we had to open up the cesspit and pour in the contents of the bucket. Now, pouring in that bucket was a two-person job, so we played Perudo to decide who should complete the task. The winner would be spared from the ordeal, and the winner was Will. I told you he cheats. You never forget pulling the lid off a cesspit. It's like looking into the jaws of hell. Before I made YouTube videos, I used to write comedy for TV. When I first moved to London, I really hated the office job that I had, so I started writing a sitcom script in the evenings. And one day I was watching a TV show that I liked, and I just looked up one of the producers I saw in the credits. I found his email address and sent him a script, and by some miracle he read it and liked it, and that's how I became a TV writer. I wrote 6 episodes of a BBC Two sitcom that aired on Saturday lunchtimes for teenagers called Popatron, and given all of those details, it was better than you'd expect. But you wouldn't have guessed it would win any BAFTAs. And it didn't. I then spent years trying to get another sitcom commissioned. Absolutely the funniest things I've ever written are trapped in screenplays that will never get made. And it feels like such a waste of your passion. That's one thing that I really appreciate about being a YouTuber, is that people actually get to see what I make now. That if I write a joke that I like, it doesn't go to waste. During that period, I did loads of little bits of writing here and there. I got to work on a show hosted by Lee Mack, and he has got the quickest wit of anyone I've ever met, which you'll know if you've seen him on Would I Lie to You. He's just like that in real life. I wrote some lines for Darren Brown and Jimmy Carr, and I was in the writer's room for 10 episodes of The Amazing World of Gumball on Cartoon Network. But none of it was what I felt I was really good at, writing sitcoms. But getting a sitcom made is really hard, especially as an unknown writer. You're effectively asking a channel to spend £500,000 on your idea. So I was ecstatic when the BBC paid me to write a pilot script for one of my ideas, and I was devastated when they didn't take it any further. There's a lot of rejection, and a weird amount of people telling you you're great and that your script is great, but it's all empty words because production companies expect you to write for free. And eventually it just got too depressing, and that's why I started down the YouTube path. There's this thing I do when I write scripts and I know I have to cut stuff out. I don't delete it, I copy and paste it to another document, so I can always go back to it if I need to, but I never do. And I did the same thing with my TV career. I kept having meetings and writing scripts, telling myself I hadn't given up, until eventually I was a full-time YouTuber. I'd love to go back to it one day and become the next Richard Curtis like I'd planned, but the UK makes even less scripted comedy now than they did back then, so I don't like my chances. Since you asked, my favourite sitcom of all time is the first 3 seasons of Arrested Development. It really blew my mind with how many jokes you could pack into a sitcom, and just such an incredible ensemble of characters. 30 Rock is a close second, then Veep and Happy Endings. I prefer those American sitcoms because they're so polished. You can really feel that a team of writers has made it. The joke rate is so high. I think it's really common for Americans to say that British comedy is better, and both countries make some terrible sitcoms, but I think the best American sitcoms are that bit better than the best British ones. From the UK, I first got excited about writing comedy by things like Brass Eye, I'm Alan Partridge, and The British Office, which, like most people my age, I can still recite most lines off by heart. I met my wife Serena at university in Bristol, which is what you say when you didn't attend the prestigious University of Bristol. She was living with a friend of mine who I went to visit, and while she was there, she was having troubles with her internet connection. And ever the tech geek, I stepped in to help. I must have made more than a TCP IP connection that day because she told her friend, who told my friend, that she liked me, and 6 months later I did something about it. We got married in 2019 and we had a small ceremony in Edinburgh. If you have a humanist ceremony in Scotland, you can get married pretty much anywhere you like. So we chose a beautiful spot in Holyrood Park, halfway up the hill towards Arthur's Seat, by a ruined chapel from the 15th century. And it was a beautiful Scottish summer's day, which, in other words, it rained. But this wasn't any normal kind of rain. It was apocalyptic levels of water falling from the sky. It rained so much that the bag we were keeping our marriage license in got soaked. And before we could sign it, we had to find a nearby cafe and use their panini press to dry it out. It was an incredible day, captured by my favorite photo, taken by my friend Sam, who you might remember from my Pitfalls video as a gamer I met at the UK Games Expo. We've been together now for 18 years, and I feel so lucky to have met my soulmate so young. I see it like a privilege, like being born rich or beautiful. It makes life easier to have a partner. She encouraged me to become a writer, then a YouTuber, supported me when I was struggling, and she's read my script for every one of these videos to tell me which bits to cut out. So if you don't like something, in a way, it's her fault. We've played over 1,000 board games together. We have very similar tastes in games. She likes social, interactive games, nothing too thinky. And every time I ask her favorites, it's a different answer. But this time she said Lost Cities, Tobago, and Survive Escape from Atlantis. I think someone's dreaming about going on holiday. And this year she gave birth to our wonderful daughter, who is now 5 months old and the best thing ever. My obsession with modern board games started 12 years ago, thanks to my friend Phil and his dad, Peter. Peter has been into hobby board games since the 70s. He's a big war gamer and has a wall full of classic Euro games. At the time, he was living in London, so I had an opportunity to sample his collection. I was a newbie looking for a gateway into the hobby, and this is the list of games he gave me to choose from: Puerto Rico, Race for the Galaxy, China, Chicago Express, London, and Ra. I wish I'd picked Ra, an incredible auction game which I only fell in love with in the last few years, or China, which is now in my collection as a Wari. But no, I picked London, and all because of the theme. I had theme blindness from the word go. This is me, Serena, and Phil playing London with Peter for the first time. Back then, camera phone quality was as ugly as the board games. I really enjoyed the experience of playing a proper board game for adults with meaningful decisions and so much going on. It felt very different from anything I'd played up until that point. It was more serious and harder than Catan. I definitely got analysis paralysis. But most of all, I enjoyed the social occasion, to spend an evening together, chatting and inhabiting this game. London itself didn't win me over. I actually haven't played it since, but it gave me a taste of what was out there. I started researching games on Board Game Geek, and it felt like I'd unlocked Narnia. How could thousands of games that I'd never heard of have been there this whole time? That year, I spent Christmas Day with Serena and Phil in London, and Serena bought me Ticket to Ride Europe, and Phil bought me Samarkand Roots to Riches. We played them both that day and had such an amazing time that I forgot to take any photos. And from then on, my obsession snowballed. It was the perfect hobby for me at the perfect time. I wasn't making enough money from writing to be going out drinking all the time like before, but I was getting really lonely working from home every day, so I needed a reason to see my friends that didn't revolve around a pub. At the time, our tiny one-bedroom flat didn't have space for a permanent dining table, but we had an IKEA desk that every time we wanted to play, I would screw the legs back onto. But sometimes I couldn't be bothered and we would just play on the floor. And if Will sat on the floor, he can't cheat by hiding his cards under the table. Before I was a board gamer, I was a video gamer, and it all started with the SNES. We'd plug in a multi-tap and play 4-player Bomberman, Street Racer, and Micro Machines, having some of the best times of my life. As a teenager, I got a PS2, and so began my love of the football game, FIFA. Every Wednesday night after school, we went to Will's house and played it for hours. At uni, I would play it every day with my flatmates, and I've been playing it ever since. I stopped following football years ago, but I've kept playing FIFA. It's become something I do to relax when I just want to switch off my brain at the end of the day. Now, sadly, I play it on my own, online against random people. Growing old is not having friends close at hand anymore. But over the years, I've clung to those dreams of couch multiplayer. I bought a Wii just so I could have people round to play Wii Sports, and the rest of the time it gathered dust. I bought 4 microphones for SingStar so we could have karaoke nights, and the day we played the Take That edition could be the greatest day of our lives. Then I went all in on the band version of Guitar Hero, which I absolutely loved. So much so that for my 25th birthday, I rented the upstairs of a pub and invited 16 friends to take part in a Battle of the Bands tournament. When I look back, it feels like my love of board games was inevitable. I've always been looking for an excuse to get all my friends in one room and have some fun, just like we did with the SNES. When I was a kid, me and my brother played all the usual board games like Monopoly and Cluedo and the Game of Life, but I remember being especially excited by a game called Hotels, with very 80s looking plastic hotels adorned with metallic stickers. I don't remember a single thing about the gameplay, it was just the most impressive looking game that we owned. Kids have no immunity to theme blindness, and I definitely went through a phase of loving Risk. My cousin found this that I'd written in a thank you letter after Christmas one year. It reads, "At the moment, my brother is setting up Risk, which has over 300 figures." I can't believe I was excited by plastic miniatures. So embarrassing. I'm someone who suffers from anxiety, and the reason I share this story is because I would have loved to have heard it from someone like me when I was struggling. My anxiety comes in chapters, and by far the worst chapter came in 2017. I remember it so vividly. It was a Saturday, and I'd been at a board game meetup having a brilliant time. Later that evening, with absolutely no catalyst or warning, I had a panic attack about the thought of dying. I was crying and shaking. Serena couldn't calm me down. Nothing was helping. We tried to play a game to distract me, a word game called Word Domination, but it didn't help, and I've never been able to think of that game since without remembering that moment. I couldn't get past those thoughts. I felt totally lost. And the first people I turned to were some gaming friends, Neil and Pankaj, because they were the people I was chatting to every day about games. They came over to play games with me the next day, and it made me feel less alone and gave me a break from being in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about death. And when I googled it, I couldn't find much about it other than that the pop star Rita Ora suffers from it, which gave me some comfort, but also some concern. Was Rita Ora my only ally? She's probably kind of busy. For the best part of a year, I would have panic attacks, days where I couldn't operate and where I was convinced I was broken, that a switch had flicked and I was never going to return to my former self. I eventually started to see a therapist, which was an intense, cathartic experience, but in between sessions, I was still struggling. So I began taking antidepressants, which helped make everything seem less impossible. I so hated being alone with my thoughts when I was working from home that I applied for jobs thinking that being a YouTuber was making it worse. I finally got one at a board game publisher, and just the change of pace, the feeling of being part of a team really helped my self-worth and made me feel that life wasn't all falling apart. And through the therapy, I tackled the things that lay underneath it all, things that I wish I dealt with years ago. And I felt ready to stop the antidepressants. Slowly, the fear of death began to recede. It's still there, but it isn't the first place my mind goes to anymore. And ever since, things have been so much better. I left the job and went back to YouTube full-time with a new lease of life. I still get anxious at times, but it's not on the same level. I wanted to share this because I remember feeling completely hopeless, thinking that I would never get my life back. And I did. So maybe that can offer some hope to anyone in a similar situation. My favorite Christmas present when I was a kid was a karaoke machine. I used to belt out Careless Whisper by George Michael. And later on, I used to use my karaoke machine to pretend to be a radio DJ. And then when I was older, I started volunteering at my local hospital radio station, presenting a show once a week. When I was 19, over the summer, I had my own show on a community radio station that broadcast on FM, which I was so excited about, thinking that I'd become a radio DJ one day. Around the same time, I'd started a blog, just random personal stuff. I'd mostly write funny match reports for my university football team. When I went in to present my second radio show, I got called into the office of the guys running the station. Now imagine a 19-year-old being surrounded by 3 angry-looking 40-year-old men, like I'm being interrogated at a police station. And they've printed out pages from my blog, and they're reading things I'd written back to me. It turns out, 2 months previously, I'd written some pointless blog post about the radio station, complete with some 19-year-old sense of humor jokes about the community. And when a local resident had Googled the radio station, their search engine optimization for the website was so bad that my blog post came up first. The local resident didn't find my blog funny, so he told the station, who fired me on the spot. I was gutted. I started crying because my dreams of becoming a local radio DJ were in tatters. And that's the day I learned to be careful what you put on the internet. I never worked in radio again after that, but I did keep writing funny things on the internet, safe in the knowledge that I'll never take myself as seriously as those three men running a community radio station. I always felt like a bit of a fraud on YouTube because I didn't watch other channels very much. I've never really watched one channel religiously. I just catch whatever goes viral on Reddit and watch the Dice Tower top 10s. But these days I watch a lot more YouTube than I used to, a habit that I picked up during lockdown. And I thought I'd talk about some of my favorite channels. It was during lockdown that I got hooked on the channels Smosh Pit and Smosh Games, which are like a family of likable comedy actors. They make some really funny videos. One of my favorites is America's Next Top Simp. But what I like about it more is it's just this friendly group of people that have great chemistry and they're just fun to be around. And the more you watch it and get to know them, you start to get all the jokes that they make about each other. Like in the funeral roast when they get into character and roast each other. They play board games on Smosh Games and sometimes some good games, but it's honestly funnier when they play the really silly party games that you'd never play at home because it's way more chaotic and entertaining to watch. Through Smosh, I found Artists on Artists on Artists, which is a comedy improv podcast where they parody those self-indulgent Hollywood actor roundtables, but with a different group of fictional artists each time. I love the episode on Gossip Columnist and Hollywood Muses starring Skeleton Brimblebones, Tim Burton's muse. On another side of YouTube, I watch a lot of channels about videography, trying to improve my skills for making videos. I really enjoy the videos from DSLR Video Shooter, who has a lot of really creative approaches to camera rigs and studio setups, and just a brilliant, relaxed style. You can tell he's been doing videos now for 10 years or more. It's really easy to get wooed by videography channels because they're also beautifully shot, and they've encouraged me to buy equipment way beyond what you need for YouTube. That's why lately I've been enjoying the videos from fellow filmmaker whose advice is much better suited to my level of video making. I especially like her tips on lighting and rigging. And for something completely different, I like the channel Not Just Bikes, which talks about public transport and city planning from the perspective of a Canadian guy living in Amsterdam. He does a great job of showing why the Netherlands is not just great for cyclists, but pedestrians and residents, comparing it to North American cities. He makes some great arguments, and he's funny too. I hope that the people in charge of improving London, not fake London, are all subscribed to his channel. And I want to finish by pointing you towards some of my older videos that have got lost in the archives. I've got 100,000 subscribers now, but these videos have less than 50,000 views, so at least half of you have never watched them. And I think they're just as good as anything I'm making now. So I'll put links to them below. Please give them a chance. The first is my board game collection song. And this one is mostly just an impressive feat. I took the names of 195 board games from my collection and used them to rewrite the Countries of the World song from Animaniacs. You know, the one that goes United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru. And I moved every single box in front of the camera in time with the music. And to do that, I had to empty every box. The second is my Pandemic Legacy song, which 3/4 of my subscribers have never watched. It's a funny song called Play With Yourself, about playing a co-op game with an alpha gamer who tells everyone what to do and how they should go play with themselves. It has some great lines in it, it has cameos from Matt Leacock and Rob Davio, and it has a kazoo solo. Third is my board game advice for Daniel Radcliffe. This is possibly my favorite video I've ever made because of how silly it is. Now, I don't want to spoil it too much, but if you like the humor in my videos, I really think you'll like this one. And I've still never heard from Daniel Radcliffe, so we need more people to watch it for that reason alone. Fourth is The Board Game Ambassador, and this is a comedy sketch that I did about what runs through your head as a board gamer when you meet someone else that likes board games. And number 5 is my Hidden Movement Mega Review. If you like puns, this is the video for you. It's from the early days, so it's a bit rough around the edges, but I dress up as 2 different Sherlocks, it's packed full of jokes, and it's one of my favorites from that era of Actualol. That's it, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit more about me, and if you didn't, please don't let me know in the comments. We'll get back to the board game content in the next video. I'm John Perkis, thanks for watching.